Bonnie is the name your parents gave you. Why should they get to tell you who you are? They don't own you. What's your name?
Jane.
We love you, Jane. We love you, Jane.
Ooh, look at the time. It's time for a King of the Hill review. Another highly requested episode to review was the cult episode involving Luanne. So, let's talk about fun with Jane and Jane. Also plug in my Discord. So we get a lot of great seeds of layers with this first scene alone. Buck wants Hank to feed his emus, giving him a gun. He also does the trick of complimenting Hank before asking him to do a favor. That sort of calculated approach is something that Buck is known for. However, I find it extra scummy, but in a good way. He's essentially trying to cover his tracks and throw Hank under the bus by having Hank come to Buck's conclusion without Buck having to admit his true intentions.
You gotta run to my farm, feed my emus for me. Here, feed him with this.
It's that naive, taking advantage of relationship that I enjoy in King of the Hill because to any fan, we know that Buck does respect Hank on a deeper level, and is shown in other episodes, like the time when Hank went to a convention with Buck and had to parent him along with Buck's son. The other layer here is while Hank initially denies any participation because he promised Peggy on a date, the episode cleverly introduces the layer of exactly how many friends some characters truly have in King of the Hill. Although this now cancelled date ruins Peggy's night, it's not just her who has to deal with the lack of a proper friend circle.
Luanne, you're in college. You should meet some people your own age. I fear I am becoming your incredibly fun crutch.
When you think about it, Luanne didn't really have friends, but either a family and/or a boyfriend. In fact, Luanne was pretty much the closest to Peggy in many episodes. So to have Luanne be pushed by Peggy in order to make other friends, now that she's in college, is a great shift and would allow for her characters to have new opportunities and not get old. Peggy also turns to Bobby, but Bobby wants no part in this episode, as he should. So back in the review I mentioned this episode in, I believe I was comparing it to if it was the creepiest episode of King of the Hill. Spoiler alert, it isn't. It's definitely interesting to talk about the antagonist and what this episode represents, but the episode's creepy vibes come more from the intentions and speculations and the what ifs than actual things that happen within this episode. Luanne tries to Zeta it up and gets kicked out for not being a rich kid or a relative of a former member. Not before dropping some gems though.
You're a legacy. My mother and grandmother were sisters at Texas Tech. Your mother and grandmother were sisters?
When they said they keep sororities inclusive, they didn't mean within your own family. A much needed but awfully sad scene is the Zeta sorority girls laughing at Luanne. It forces Luanne to initially reject the idea of friends, since a large amount of people don't see her as a potential friend, and also leaves her vulnerable to anyone who may see her as one in the meantime. Despite his limited screen time, my favorite character in this episode is Dale.
I can't do it. Yes, I can. No, I can't. It's too damn majestic. Wait, I found the strength. Ah, who am I kidding? Hey, is that one laughing at me?
I know Dale is always Dale, but here it works really well. I find his killer pest control for higher episodes much better than many of the episodes that he's in, especially if they deal with the whole romance arc. Which, fun fact, the whole John, Redcorn, Nancy, Dale arc is done before this episode airs. Also, remember this whole emo eating out of the hand scene, it's gonna be muy important later.
Hey, did you just break up with your boyfriend? Girlfriend?
I just love how she does her best Ice Cube impression. However, unlike the Zeta house, the Omega house wishes to accept Luanne as is, allegedly, and agrees that snooty rich girls have no place telling you their opinion of you. They hit it off well, extremely well, almost as if this is something that she's rehearsed in practice. Peggy's alone at home as she doesn't want to deal with Nancy either, or is it either? One thing the story does masterfully is tell the exact same story twice in the same episode, however each character's motivations adjusted and not exactly the same even though they reach the same destination. Both Luanne and Peggy have no friend circle, however you're going to see Luanne's side happen in the short run, and in the long run, Peggy's side will happen. And honestly, it didn't seem old or repetitive or lazy, but rather a creative and interesting way to give variety to an episode that was already pretty engaging off the concept. Luanne also drops maybe a slip, but she doesn't have to quote,
"Waste another Friday night playing games with you ever again."
I know many of you don't like Peggy, but for Luanne to say that, that's pretty rude. Rude, ma'am. Hank lies to his boss, feels bad about it. The emu part is kind of cut and dry from this point, it's not meant to be the focus, but it does contribute to the ending. Since they don't kill them, they just meander with the emu until later on in the episode when they run away. That's all you really need to know there. But for more interesting stuff,
I'll grab your bags.
Lisa, we are here to help you.
I'm not Lisa. My name is Jane. Let me go.
Oh, my baby, we finally found you.
Around the halfway point, we get confirmation that the Omega is known for being a cult. There's so many questions that go unanswered for this episode. Does the school know of Omega being a cult? If so, are they a part of it too? Does the Zeta House know of the Omega House being a cult? Is the Zeta House also a cult too, just with another company? We finally get a glimpse into the Omega House, with their language, codes, and practices. It highly revolves around this jam and jelly product that is eaten, sold, and manufactured by the people who are recruited by the Omega House, ran by Jane, voiced by Tara Strong. Their calm and collected personalities being driven a near religious agenda clashes often with Luanne's free and bombastic style.
You! What's your name?
She's Jane. I'm Luanne.
You're making this very difficult, Jane.
It makes me more curious on the following. How come the leader Jane is so frustrated at Luanne not converting day one? You'd think for a cult, they'd have the experience to deal with even the most stubborn person. Considering the amount of days pass, wouldn't it be easier to coax her being a Jane over time, rather than brute forcing it literally the night that she steps into the house? I mean, there's no physical violence or restraining done in the episode, and most of the persuasion done revolves around the lack of food or verbal reassurance. It's just that, had leader Jane not be so forward in trying to convert Luanne day one, Luanne wouldn't have felt the need to show a concern to her family, and they wouldn't have lost her due to Hank and the crew getting involved. I'm no cult leader, even though I run the Alpha House, which is not a cult, but if you do join me, you must worship me, and my path to being the most subscribed OG panda on the platform. Let's get it, boys. Even though I was gonna skip over a majority of the Emu Hank B plot, I do have a question here as well.
Oh, they're so cute. No, don't let them get away.
Okay, so if you wanted to get rid of the emu, get rid of the emu. If you didn't want to set the emu free, then why did Bill open the door? You can't say for fresh air when Dale left his side open, and presumably the window was open in the passenger seat. They're wild animals. They're not going to stay on the side of a car regardless of if Bill petted them or not. Also, it just seems a little weird that you give us the answers to getting the emus to sit still, then have the characters run around not knowing how to get the emos to sit still. Lastly, get your gun, tap 1 or 2 on a keyboard, aim, and fire. You could have your guns out at any point if you wanted to get rid of them. But anyway, as per rule of threes, Peggy is shown for the 3rd time being lonely with no friends to hang out with, resorting to using her high school yearbook and a phone book to get in contact with old, maybe not friends.
You think you are hungry, but you're not. Your body lies to you, just like your parents. But you can trust us.
Listen, these hands are going to lie all over your face if you don't pass me a Jane burger. There's no way you're feeding me rice all day and not letting me sleep.
Will you tell me if I have to go to the bathroom right now? Because I feel like I do, but a lot of times when I get there, I don't. And I just sit there and hum.
No! No bathroom!
Oh my god, are you telling me now I can't take a panda whiz? This place is the worst. However, in all seriousness, Leader Jane plays off of the bad relationships one has with someone, whom they deem sort of close to in their life still. By getting in between a strained relationship and offering a better alternative, that person will choose the better alternative, even if that means once they receive said trust, they're malicious. Another thing the lawful evil side of me enjoys in this episode is the fact that it gives you the illusion of freedom and control. Leader Jane goes on and on about how your parents don't control who gives you your name, and your body doesn't control the way you feel, which leads into the question of who, because she never answers that question. You think you control it, however with the naming options and the diet options, it's clear that the promise of freedom of choice is only a disguise to get you to choose only what the Leader Jane would want.
They're so delicious, especially when smeared on a piping hot English muffin. The ranch is also
Whoa, did you just put the muffin back in the basket? Ew! What if I wanted a muffin and didn't see the bite marks? What if you put the bitten part over a completely not contaminated muffin? Like you're getting really close to getting drop kicked. Luanne messes up royally by ordering a pizza without anyone's consent or heads up, leading into her being locked into a closet to be reprimanded. She finally gets the hint when Leader Jane threatens the idea of her having 0 friends, and we finally get to the scene that never needed to happen.
If they catch me talking to you, they'll throw me in the closet again. I'm so tired and hungry. Tastes delicious on muffins, bagels, or crackers.
You know, this wouldn't have happened if Leader Jane adjusted her persuasion to happen over the long term, because now you have Hank's knowledge on this. He's in this now. But we get to something even more egregious in a second, but allow me to compare. So with Trip, he also tried to persuade Luanne into his agenda, as Luanne is often manipulated within King of the Hill. However, with him, it started off with love, and it slowly turned into a more serious, one-sided relationship. The reason why Trip is a more effective and overall more entertaining villain or antagonist is because he at least understood that Luanne was going to run home to Peggy and Hank, people whom he knew he couldn't persuade to join his side, as he didn't need him. Granted, here Luanne was recruited on a college bench, but that doesn't explain.
All sororities do hazing. The harder it is, the stronger the friendships. Why do you think POWs are always having reunions? Now, come on, get in the car. I'm gonna take you back.
This is where the episode drives off a jam and jelly cliff. So Peggy takes her back, but Luanne totally forgets why she wanted to leave in the first place. She doesn't even protest the idea at Hank's house. She definitely doesn't protest the idea at the gate. Bro, these scenes are literally next to each other. Luanne complains to Hank, Peggy brings Luanne back, and I'm pretty conflicted here. While on one hand, I have to hand it to Peggy, and the writers suffusing together Peggy's constant loneliness in the episode, and integrating both plots together in a somewhat believable way, showing the both short-term and long-term relationship that I was talking about. Luanne's a bigger idiot in this episode than she's ever been. There's being easily manipulated into short-term gains, and then there's just being a full-blown idiot with short-term memory loss, and she's definitely the latter in this episode. It could be just me, but I think the part where Peggy and Luanne return to the cult could have just been better. Maybe something like, maybe Peggy storms down to yell at them for doing what they did to Luanne, but Leader Jane offering friendship and Peggy accepting. They don't even show Luanne mad, worried, or anxious. She's regressed back into the mental space she was at before she was thrown in a broom closet.
You are of high intellect, Peggy. No matter what you've been told by your husband.
No.
Your father.
Not really.
Mother.
How did you know?
Because we love you!
But that part was hilarious. Now we get to the part where I question my own sanity. Okay, so Buck wants the emu back because the insurance company assumes that he's committing fraud and thus wants to see the dead bodies, thinking that his grief isn't enough. And you know what? I can buy that. Pretty natural. Pretty believable. You wanna know what isn't believable?
We didn't want to cruise around town with a truckload of dead emus, so we had them butchered and packaged. Mr. Strickland will buy that, right?
The bigger question is, why would the insurance company give you money for emu that you allegedly kill within the story? Because imagine for a second, you feed the emus, they die, and then you individually wrap up a proportional amount of emu meat. Unless Luanne is running the insurance company, you kinda shot yourself in the emu foot there, Hank. But story-wise, I know exactly why they did this. So Hank learns of it being a cult only because he let it slip in a natural, casual conversation, and Dale has exterminated there before, which is fine, and they go to rescue Luanne and Peggy.
Excuse me, are y'all with the cult?
We're not a cult. We're an organization that promotes love and...
Yeah, this is it.
Leave it to King of the Hill to have the day be saved by meat.
Ugh, my arm, it's cramping. I'm down.
Dang it, Dale, my wife is in there. Keep fanning.
See, even Hank wants Luanne to suffer the consequences of her actions. I mean, I can't get over that. She received first-hand experience of no food, poor conditions, and her freedom restricted, and she never protests going back because Peggy wants friends too. This episode is going to jam and jelly me. So Hank's meat saves the day as he offers it to his wife, his niece, and some other college students, and you know, Bill offers his meat as well, and some people seem to enjoy it. This leads into them remembering their names and also former life, saving the day. The episode ends with the emus jumping Buck for having an ugly face, and that was fun with Jane and Jane. Overall, an average episode. It's not a great episode. It's a very, very interesting Luanne episode, but it saves itself from being a bad episode by having a lot of interesting story elements within it. I wouldn't skip this episode in a binge watch, but it wouldn't be my first pick. So, King of the Hill Hive, I know I have a lot of King of the Hill fans here. What is the next episode that you want me to cover? Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see the other Luanne-centered episode I was talking about in this review, that's Pygmalion, click here, or just the entire King of the Hill playlist together. Binge away. Special thanks to the patrons of June, and until next time, take care. Alpha out.